Good morning to all of you. Before we start today's session, please feel free to do event check-in. This will give you access to additional resources and information about events that we are running on Reactor, which are around similar topics to today's session. Also, you will be able to access links from today's session. I will share the event check-in link with the event ID in the Q&A section shortly. Also, we have launched our Reactor group on LinkedIn. Please feel free to join the group to get the latest update on session happening on Reactor. I will share the joining link soon. Thank you all once again for joining us today. My name is Rashmita and I'm the event planner for Microsoft Reactor Bengaluru, India. This session will run over the next 2 to 3 hours, including Q&A. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our Reactor YouTube channel within 3 to 4 days. I will share the link to our YouTube channel in the chat section soon. Quick word on our code of conduct. We display this at all Microsoft Reactor events that we run, and it's just a reminder to be aware of others. Key thing to take out here is to be respectful of other people's views, understanding of differences, being kind and considerate in the way you engage. The chat will be open throughout, and we do encourage you all to participate. Also, please keep your mics muted during the session. I would now like to welcome Mamta, our speaker for today's session. She is an enterprise architect and an author with 17 plus years of IT experience, skilled cloud solution architect with 9 plus years of hands-on experience migrating, automating, and optimizing mission-critical deployments in various cloud platforms. Currently, she is working in TechScalable as co-founder. But for now, I will hand over to Mamta to begin the session. Over to you, Mamta.
Thanks, Rashmita. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining on a weekend, taking out time to listen to us. And today's agenda is there on the screen. We would be first discussing about Azure Spring Cloud. So we'll start with a little bit more basics. We'll talk about Spring Cloud. We'll talk about Monolithic and Microservices. And that's how Spring originated. And then why we should use Azure Spring Cloud. What are benefits or features do we get with this platform as a service offering from Azure? We would deploy our simple Spring Cloud application, and then we would try and understand if you want to create a multi-container type of application in which there is say, a front end is there, a back end is there, and there are multiple types of back end. And in case of distributed architectures, we normally have dedicated databases. So I'll try to show you 2, 3 demos with 2, 3 different types of application connecting to Cosmos DB, application integrating with MySQL. How do we integrate those things? Configuration server is one of the important building blocks, I would say, because when we have a distributed architecture, supplying the configuration from a central location to all the app services is very important, and that we would discuss about. And as I said, we would bind the database to the application, and at the end, we would have the Q&A session. So I would like to start first with the monolithic applications architecture. I've taken here 2, 3 different varied varieties of architecture. There is a very good book from Manning Publication, which has food to go application, like how we have Swiggy in India. So Swiggy type of application, if we have, how do we deploy? And in case that Swiggy application is a monolithic application. So there is a keyword here called as monolithic. Application is called monolithic if it produces a single executable out of it. Like you can say a single jar file or a var file in case of Java application. So if you see this outer box, this is called the entire app scope. Within this, the entire application would reside, this hexagon. We define the boundary, the scope or the boundary of an application with a hexagonal symbol like this. And inside the hexagon, you would see there are multiple boxes. So it's not that our application is very tightly coupled, but it is that people have not thought to have a distributed type of architecture. Imagine you're having a Swiggy type of application in which restaurant management service is there, delivery management service is there, order management is there, payment is there, notification is there, billing is there, kitchen management is there. Like that, n number of different types of logics are residing. But when we are building and we are deploying this application, a single executable gets produced out of it. Let it be a .NET application, let it be a Java, a C, C++ type of application. When you build and you try to deploy, you're producing a single bulky executable. And if you see here, you have this MySQL adapter connecting us to the MySQL database. The entire application is having a single database to which it is connected. So this internal boundary is the boundary of the app, and the external boundary is the boundary of the application plus some connectors which helps us in connecting to the third-party services. So you can see here that either we have REST APIs, the UI interface, or I want to integrate with a messaging system, a email system, a payment gateway. In those cases, these adapters play a important role. They help us interact with those applications. So what happens in this case? If think from a software development lifecycle perspective, if a single line change or a single, say, Delta feature implementation comes for the restaurant management, I will have to rebuild this entire app and then produce a jar file and deploy that jar file to my end virtual machine. So going on to the next step, even though teams are segregated as per their responsibilities, we have a dedicated team for developing order management service, restaurant management service, delivery management service. But end of the day, everyone's source code is residing here together. And there is a single CI/CD pipeline which is building and producing a single executable. And when you deploy, all of them get deployed. That means the entire app. I can't say that I'll go and deploy only restaurant management. That decoupling is not there. And that's the disadvantage of your monolithic applications. Monolithic applications are tightly coupled. Monolithic applications produce a single executable. Monolithic application gets deployed as a single executable. So if any single logic is changing inside the application, the entire app has to be rebuilt and redeployed. You don't have the option of just going ahead and deploying a single service of it. Second point, the development process becomes more difficult, because if I have a single line of change or a single feature implementation, even though order management is getting impacted, because my code is very tightly coupled, the impact on the entire code has to be assessed, because these are just one function call away from each other. So assessment, testing, they have to be very they are crucial things here. And when the application is struggling, one, say, imagine kitchen management has a trouble, the entire app goes down. And that's the reason monolithic is not that good. And if you have to go ahead and scale, I may not be, say, imagine that IPL match is going on and we have given some food coupons. If someone is hitting a 6, then you get a discount code type of thing. So in that case, a lot of people are looking into the restaurant's menu, but very few people are ordering, or payment which is going through is very less. In that case, what happens? Payment management or notification or payment gateway integration stuffs, they need not be scaled to number of higher instances, but my restaurant management or the order management, few of the instances of the application needs more resources and they need more, we need to scale them. But here what happens, because it is a single executable, if I scale, the entire app will scale into 10 times, right? So that's the reason these are few of the disadvantages of monolithic. Now, solution to monolithic. Solution to monolithic would be we expect to have a loosely coupled architecture across services. Order management is one service, kitchen management is one service, restaurant management is one service. We plan to have an independent deployment, test, development, deployment, and test. I want to develop it separately. Restaurant management changes come, test restaurant management with stubs and all that. You mock the neighboring services, what you're expecting to send as an input and what should be the output. All those things can be mocked and our application can be tested. And finally, only restaurant management would get deployed. So separate jar files for restaurant management, a separate jar for war file for a kitchen management, a separate jar file for courier management. Like that, a lot of jar files would be produced. Small services worked by small team, scalability becomes easier. If a lot of people are ordering food, kitchen management service can scale to more numbers. Independently upgradable change in restaurant management can produce restaurant management jar, go ahead and deploy it. You don't have to bring down the entire system. This is how the entire applications which we interact with on a regular basis, let it be Amazon, let it be Swiggy, Ola, Uber, Netflix, all of them are using this fundamental of not deploying a monolithic app, rather deploying a microservices based architecture. So if I move on from monolithic to microservices, and I think of breaking down into small individual microservices. In that case, what happens? Our architectural diagram would look like this. So order service has its own hexagon, restaurant service has its own hexagon. I had mentioned this hexagon denotes the boundary of our application. One service boundary is this now. Kitchen management, delivery management, accounting, notification, all are having different individual dedicated boundaries now. And they can interact with each other with the help of adapters. And you have seen here that databases are also dedicated. Some may be good with NoSQL database, some may be good with relational database, some wants to have a distributed database. So we have a choice of selecting as per the service requirement. And normally we always introduce an API gateway that is a single point to enter the system. And from there we move out or move into the actual services, whichever gets called. So there are various ways of moving to microservices architecture or designing it. One way is domain-driven design. Another is behavioral-driven design. How do you segregate your services? How you do divide your services or have that loose coupling across services? That there are a lot of logics behind it. Design patterns are there using which you can implement. Now, I would have a separate CI/CD pipeline for each of the services because they would be generating a standalone jar files for themselves. They would have their own dedicated jar files for it. So what happens in that case? We would be going ahead and having a separate CI/CD pipeline. Whenever changes are there, we would go ahead and deploy the delta changes of whichever individual service which gets produced. So this is how the microservice CI/CD pipeline would look for our application of food to go. So why we are talking about microservices? Because Spring Boot applications, we normally these days, because we are talking about cloud native applications, we deploy them, we break them into microservices, and then we deploy them so that we can manage them better, scale them better, maintain them better, and deploy them, develop, test, whatever, whichever phase of the life cycle you go in, you would be able to do justice with the application. And we would have a very rather, I would say we don't have downtime these days because microservices are designed with an intention that we are designing for the failure scenarios. we don't design for the sunny days scenarios. We design for the rainy days scenarios. So we predict what type of failures would be done, can happen in the real time, and we have a fallback actions coded for it. That is one thing. And we also always try to have a very less minimal interaction between two services so that if one is going down, the other one is not impacted. The loosely coupled architecture, which is called as. So these are the few of the advantages of microservices based application. And that's the reason it is widely used. These microservices we would be deploying using Azure Spring Cloud today. So we would move on to the Azure Spring Cloud. I see one person has raised the hand. So if you can post your question in the chat, Kanishk, that would be good. I'll pick up the question from the chat. I'll pick up the question from the beginning. There were a few more questions. Krishnamurthi's question is, I think I should address him as Raja Krishnamurthy, I'm not sure. So how does microservice app differ from a three-tier, multi-tier type of app? See, in multi-tier application, normally we have a front end, a middle tier, or a back end tier, right, Krishnamurthy? So the back end tier is again common across the middle tier. A middle tier has n number of logic. It's not that my application is very small application. It just does one activity. It has to manage order. It has to manage restaurants. It has to manage delivery services. New delivery guys are registering. We have to manage their database. Restaurants are registering their database. We have to manage kitchen management services there. When we are ordering in Swiggy, we see the status of the food getting prepared, the person has reached. They are individual services which are updating us at that point in time. If you think of a multi-tier application, it still has a lot of logic coupled together, majorly on the middle tier, and it has a dedicated single type of database at the back end. I don't have the liberty of choosing a different language, a different, say, a database for each of my services. That is not there. And that would be one of the biggest difference between a multi-tier and a microservices-based architecture. Indrajit says notification service has, yeah. So in that picture, they had taken SNS. Uh, it's not there in Azure. Uh, this picture was taken from a book. So people implement in various different clouds, right? So don't think that Azure doesn't have a service and I'm picking up an example of it. It's not like that. It was just an example being taken, notification service. Surya had a question, how tractions will be maintained among the databases. So it depends, like a lot of different ways are there to implement the databases. Uh, the databases, one guy's primary key would be the secondary key for the other. There are a lot of things comes when we are actually designing this microservices based architecture. People think monolithic was difficult, and that's the reason we are moving into microservices. The lifecycle management has simplified, but the architecture has got complicated because now instead of producing a single jar, you have to produce, first of all, multiple jar. Instead of having a single database, now you have to keep track of multiple databases. Suppose order is getting created, order service will get updated. Its own database, then restaurant service should also update that so and so restaurant has got one order. That also needs to have a update, right? So notifications play a very important role. Different types of messaging, say messaging which one-to-many type of messaging, one-to-one type of messaging, synchronous messaging, asynchronous messaging, because inter-service communication is very important in this case, plus identifying which service is sitting so that we can communicate, which is called a service discovery. So that is also important. So there are a lot of pieces we need to take care of. If we have architected well, then our applications are too good. They can face those scenarios. And if we have done good amount of testing, like for Netflix and all, they do this chaos monkey testing type of thing. They try to break every piece of the code. without absurd test cases would be there, and the system should be able to recover by itself. That is called as chaos monkey testing. So that's how this microservices based architecture is tested as well. But yes, the transactions which are there across databases, some notifications and all from the app side, from the service side has to go intimate the other service so that other databases are also in sync. It's not like restaurant doesn't understand there is an order management service understands there is an order, kitchen management service should start cooking, otherwise the food will not get delivered, right? So there are a lot of aspects that comes into picture. I'll go to the next question. Harsh has asked a question. Tiers are methodology to separate the modules at code level. Yes, correct. Controllers, endpoint. Okay, I think you were trying to answer the question which I've answered. Yeah, correct. How the services interact here and how they keep the sequencing who ordered first. So see, it entirely depends. It's a code level logic, which you're talking about. Our agenda today, I would not say that it is not a question we should not pick up, but our agenda today is to deploy a microservice into Azure Spring Cloud, not to go into the architecture and understand how we write the piece of code. Whatever your question is, that is within the code. How do we have fixed the, or how we have written the logic that the services would interact. For that, I said that you can look for BDD, DDD type of design methods. In that, they tell how to have a loosely coupled architecture, how to have interaction across services. As I mentioned, there are a lot of ways of different types of messaging, message queues, a lot of stuffs are there with which we can attain that. So it's just not one REST API calls are there. A lot of stuffs are there with which we can go ahead and do that. Amit had a question when it comes to deploying microservices, which is better, Spring Cloud or Kubernetes? See, Kubernetes is general. You can deploy a Spring-based application, a .NET application, any Node.js application, Express.js, React.js. It supports anything, but Spring is just for Spring. So if you are developing a Spring Cloud-based application, it's not that features are not there. You're also auto-scaling. Everything is there, which we can expect out of Kubernetes. It's just the entire world is having so many tools. It just depends on what skill set we have and what level of comfort we need. If you go with AKS, that is also a platform as a service, but at least you will have to manage the worker nodes. But in case you go with Spring Cloud, you don't have the infra to be managed. It is platform as a service offering, which would manage everything. You are just bothered about the code which you are trying to deploy, right? So your focus is just on the coding part. You don't need an infra guy to manage the steps. So what level of skill set my team members are having? Am I only going to work on Spring application? Then I'll go with Spring Cloud. If I have very different types of application, then tomorrow Mamta has to take decision. This application will go into Kubernetes, that application will go into Spring Cloud. Then again, it would be across different services. For me, management would become difficult. And that's the reason we would try to keep it in a common, like commonly how the deployment is done. We would need to plan to keep a common way of doing it. So it entirely depends on that. It's not that this is good, that is bad, this doesn't have a feature, that has a feature. Both are equally good and both are equally nice services. So it's our call what we decide. So moving on to Azure Spring Cloud now, I think we have addressed all the questions. So I'll move on to the next section in which we would discuss about the Azure Spring Cloud. So Spring Cloud is a framework for building robust cloud-based applications. This framework which is there that helps us in facilitating the development of the application. So commonly what happens when we are moving from a monolithic application to a distributed microservices based architecture, when our applications are having a distributed deployment environment, then applications that run in the microservices, they need to have separate development, deployment, test, maintenance. The phases have to be different. And because they have a decomposed type of architecture, we get a liberty that as a developer, I would focus only on order management. As a developer, I will only focus on restaurant management. We would have SMEs for those modules, right? So that helps us improve the things. So Azure Spring Cloud makes it easy for us to deploy these applications in the Azure environment and to integrate with other Azure services. Like I can go ahead and integrate with application inside. I can go ahead and integrate with Key Vault. Let it be any type of database offering from Azure. I would be able to integrate with that. So lifecycle management, monitoring, diagnostic, how do I supply configuration, how one service identifies other service. Other service needs to talk to restaurant management service. Then a communication needs to be stitched up. There would be a registry which will tell us what would be the IP of our restaurant management service. Then only the order management service would be able to communicate with it. And that's the reason that at that point in time, service discovery comes into picture. All the services, like in our previous example, restaurant management, kitchen management, courier management, notification, payment, say order management, they all of them would register. It's called as a registry. They all register here. This comes up, would register. Configuration management, IP address this. Restaurant management, IP address this. So that if these two guys have to talk to each other, this will go and query what is the IP of the restaurant management. And that keyword is called a service discovery. This is very different when we move on from multi-tier or a normal monolithic application. Why? Because there everyone were sitting together or they were sitting in virtual machines. And those virtual machines were very stable. They will not lose their IP addresses, but containers are not like that, right? They lose their IP addresses when they restart or they go down, they get recreated. It would be, it can't retain. The IP is not static there. So service discovery plays a very crucial role here. CI/CD pipeline setup for each of the services, blue-green deployment, everything can be done from that Azure Spring Cloud portal itself. All the things can be grabbed from there. So it provides a lot of services like this, which helps us in attaining a lot of flexibility, and it hides the complexity of the services which we are deploying. So you don't realize on which host, where, which service is running. You can see them beautifully on a single page. You get the links, you can click on it, analyze it. Troubleshooting them is also pretty easy with Azure Spring Cloud. These are few of the features. I tried covering few of the things there itself. So when we want to migrate our existing Spring Boot applications, Spring apps, and we want to take the features or the benefits of cloud like scaling, costing, all those stuffs, then nothing better than Azure Spring Cloud would be the option. We can go ahead and run Java based applications. We could deploy them quickly, upgrade them quickly. So effort of managing them is pretty less with it. And that's the reason we would go with it. So this was just an introduction why we would be using Azure Spring Cloud, how we would be using Azure Spring Cloud. We will go next. Just doing a time check. Okay, good. So next part should be how to create a Spring-based application. So I'll just switch on the camera so that I can be a bit comfortable and type the commands. I keep doing like this, so that should not distract you. So I'm just switching off the cam. So let's start with the creation of resources and all that stuff. Few things I've pre-cooked and kept it. So what I have done for 2-3 different scenarios I have created. The first scenario which we would pick up would be of a simple Spring application. For that, we would start with a Spring initializer. You can see here start.spring.io. This will help us in initializing a Spring Boot project. So what happens when you want to start with something, many a times the skeleton of the project becomes very important. So this particular thing helps us in creating a project structure. Either you want to do a Maven or a grader build, dependent on that. I'll just show you this. Start.spring.io it is. So let me go ahead and open that. So you can see this page. You can select which type of project you want, which type of language you're looking at, what would be the version of Spring Boot you would select. You can give the name of the project's metadata, package name, description, name, artifact name. How would you like to package it, like a jar or a var file? Which version of Java you're using, and what all dependencies you want. There are a lot of dependencies over here. Like I want to develop a Spring web-based application. So build web, including RESTful applications using Spring MVC. Or you want to develop a reactive application. Like this, there are a lot of support systems which are there, which helps us in building up the entire stuff. So this actually helps us in doing a lot of things. This actually helps us in doing a lot of things. So here you can go ahead and supply whatever you want to select. Like I want to select a Spring Web application. And if I say generate, it would generate a project structure, zip it and download it in my system. Zip it and download it in my system. So I'll go ahead and show you. I will try to use this machine. So I don't want to install Maven. I don't want to install Azure Cloud. I don't want to install any such dependent tool. Then I can go ahead and use Cloud Shell. Or else, in case you plan to have, say, your own standalone workstation, then you would be needing to install JDK 8 or 11, whichever you are using. You need to sign up for that Azure Cloud. You need to connect to it, to your Azure account. Then you would have to install Maven in it. And that should be sufficient enough. That should be sufficient enough. So I'll show you. I'm picking up an initializer for it. This initializer, as I had picked up Spring Web, I need to do service discovery. For that, I'm using Eureka. Eureka is donated to the open source community by Netflix. For building endpoints, for helping us to monitor and manage our application, we use Accutair. Then Sleuth is there for distributed tracing. Zipkin is there for distributed tracing. For configuration management, we are using config client and all. And here, the defined version. Maven project Java, this version, I'm giving some jar file, the version, I'm picking up Java 8. Okay, so I go ahead and click on generate. You would see that it gets downloaded. It is getting downloaded in my local machine, in my laptop. I want that to be downloaded here. I want that to be downloaded here, right? So I have done that. If you see here, Hello Spring is the one. I've just uploaded that file, the zip file which got created. I've just uploaded that file over here. And this gives a skeleton. If you see, I don't think tree is not there. Tree is not there over here. Otherwise, I would have shown that. So I'm just showing up some of the files. better to go here. So there was only Hello Spring application.java. This was alone existing there. I went ahead and created a Hello controller.java. This is my application. It will return greetings from Azure Spring Cloud. This is my app. So this file was not there from before. I just VI'd a file, hello controller.java, and I have gone ahead and put this code over here. This is a Java-based code. I'm not going into the coding details because our intention is to deploy the application rather than sitting and learning Java, correct? So here it would help. It will be a web page which will get deployed and it will say greetings from Azure Spring Cloud. That's the intention. So for this to work, I need to deploy this application. Where will I go ahead and deploy? So I'll go ahead and deploy this application in my Azure Spring Cloud. I'll go and search for Azure Spring Cloud. Let me just increase the font size. Yeah. Azure Spring Cloud I'm selecting. There are a few of them from before. Just ignore them in case the demo doesn't go good. I've just pre-built and kept few things to show. Or sometimes we can't estimate the time as well. That time it's difficult. So I've kept few things ready from before, but I'm doing the deployment from scratch. I've picked up subscription. I've picked up a resource group. I'll give a name for the service. Here I'll call it as Hello Spring. And I'll specify in which region. And this is the tier. 2 virtual CPU, 4 GB of RAM I'm picking up. Here it gives the cost per month and it says it charges per second. You can see diagnostic checking settings. We have enabled logging by default. It is there, and log analytics workspace will get created. Application insights will also get enabled and sampling rate and all that has been given. Network, I'm not dedicatedly creating a new network. Otherwise, you will have to create a VNet and all that and select over here. I'm not tagging the resource. I'll hit on review and create. So I have just provided the first set in which I have told the subscription. I have defined the resource group. I've given a name for the service. I've specified the region. I've chosen a pricing associated to it. And I will go ahead and deploy this resource once the validation is done. Let me just quickly check. No questions. Okay. So this will take some amount of time. Meantime, let's go ahead and build our application. Let's go ahead and build our application. So our application, if we look here, last few sentences are getting cut in the video, I think. So here, this was the thing. And I would go back. So I can, the important file in Java applications is the form.xml. Here you define all the dependencies and all that stuff. You can see here the all Zipkin, the starter web, all those things are defined here. Eureka, Netflix, Eureka, all those things are defined over here. So I'll go ahead and do a Maven clean package. Let me check, where am I? Yeah. I will go ahead and build my application. Once the application is built, I will deploy this jar which is produced into the application Azure Spring Cloud which gets created. So there is a hierarchy of things which we have to create. Like now we have created Azure Spring Cloud. In that, you would go ahead and create an app. An app would have a deployment. App would have a deployment. So at present, we are doing this. Then we do this. Once this is created, we pick up the jar file and we deploy. And that would be the actual instance. This would be the running instance of the application. So slowly we would complicate our stuffs, having an external configuration server, picking up the configurations from Git. Then how do we integrate with MySQL? How do we integrate with Cosmos DB and all? We would be looking into it. At present, we are just bringing up this. Then we would create this. And to deploy this, we need a jar file. We need a jar file. So parallelly, my code is residing here, and I am doing a Maven build. Sorry, N is missing. Maven build so that I produce a jar file. So if you see the framework from the Spring initializer, which we had picked up, we had specified that we would be creating a jar. So if I do ls over here, there is a target folder, and you would find that this is the jar which I'm generating. This application is small. It's just a single microservice which would be deployed. When we have multiple microservices, then we would have to do multiple different builds and produce separate different jars. At present, a simple app. So I'm going back one stage, and I am in Hello Spring directory. Now I created my Azure Spring Cloud instance. It is still under deployment, so I'll just wait for a while. And in that, by the time I'll write the command, so I would go ahead and create Azure Spring Cloud command. I would create an app. So app create. I'll give the name Hello Spring. Service instance name, I would try and give it. Service instance name, I'll try and give it. So here, let me just have it in a different tab altogether. Yeah, you can see here, I had deployed something called as Hello Spring only, right? So I'll give the Hello Spring here. And I would specify the resource group in which it is getting created. So -G, and I'll give the resource group. Let me pick the resource group name from here. And I would go ahead and specify this. Now, if I want this to be exposed to the external world, I would say --assign -endpoint set to true. So we are asking for an endpoint to be assigned. This would create an app inside this Hello Spring cloud deployment. And let me go ahead and see why this is taking so long. So next time we would be going ahead and first creating this. When you're doing it alone, right, you don't realize how long it is taking. And that's the reason you're chill. You are executing command and then reading through something and it comes up. We don't realize how long it took. So miscalculation in the time of spinning up. Meantime, if anyone has any question, we can pick up that by the time our Azure Spring Cloud is coming up. Anyone has a question? Kanishk, I think your question is answered. If you can just lower your hand. All going good? Are we all in understanding? Okay, there were a lot of other questions. Minimize, can you please minimize the recording window? You can compare it with Elastic Beanstalk. Yeah, correct. We can compare that with Elastic Beanstalk. You can create similar to AMI of AWS. Is it an instance? So Azure Spring Cloud it's not an instance of a running, it is not a running instance here. It's just a place where you go ahead and add the applications. It's a placeholder. How you have a cluster in case of Kubernetes and then you have the applications, you can compare to that. How to integrate the editor with live server. Yeah, in case you want to use IntelliJ or Visual Studio Code and all that, you can certainly go ahead and do that. There are different architectures, SOA versus, okay, microservices. They are entirely two different ways of creating services. SOA service-oriented architectures and microservices, I would say, I don't know. There are so many jargons in this industry at that point in time. So services, when we are focusing on services, we are designing, it's a way of designing it. Microservices is also a way of designing it. Containers or instances are a way of packaging it. And when you deploy it, you can deploy it in Spring Cloud, you can deploy it in Kubernetes. They are the platform which would help us in orchestrating and managing the life cycle of the application. I think, so we will see the scaling part later. We would go ahead and see the scaling part later. So cost is the only benefit between Spring Cloud and a machine instance in Azure or AWS. See, if you are going ahead and deploying the same application on a VM, you need to monitor that, you need to handle, you need to maintain it. It's your responsibility that you would be managing the entire life cycle. Here you are using a platform as a service offering, so cost would be more, but the responsibility which you have on your shoulders would be less, Sanket. So it's easier to manage such applications, and we would have more high availability and durability in these cases. So my Hello Spring has got deployed in demo September 25th resource group. I want to create app. That app would be created here. I can go ahead and create it from here, but the same thing I'm going ahead and creating from the command line. I'm creating from the command line. Okay, let me just see what is the subscription in which I have created. It says I can't find your resource group. So I'll just set my subscription here. Azure account set. When you have multiple subscription, sorry, why I'm saying Azure account set, AZ account set. Let me clear the screen and go ahead and execute this. Yeah, so this would go ahead and deploy the application. You would have app here. If you can see here, this just gives an overview of the Azure Spring Cloud. You have all the apps residing here. If you want to supply any configuration server details, then you can put it here. Networking, if you want to have the IP addresses, the pricing, all those things can be seen from here. Monitoring is there. Any automation you want to do, then that is over here. So at present, we have enabled App Insight and all that. So this is already there. I can go ahead and look into my application inside. Now at present, one app is getting deployed. So you should have the data in some amount of time. Okay, so here at present, no data is available. I don't know why did I click on that. Okay, now going back to this and clicking on apps. This app is deployed with a default piece of code at present. My application code is not getting deployed. If you see here, it has not even registered. It is just under provisioning, and instance is also not running. And the name of the app is Hello Spring. Now, if I click on it and I get inside, you should get an URL here because I had enabled, I wanted the assignment of the endpoint to be done. So this would get external reachability. I can directly reach to this application using this URL. So I'll wait for this app instance to come up. I have just run one instance. Later, we would see how we would be scaling and all that stuff. That would be the second part of it. First, let's learn how to deploy these instances. In case my application is being developed in some other language, then Spring is not the one. You will have to use other resources for it or other services for it. Spring is just a Java framework. It's not a .NET or any other language framework. And that's the reason in the beginning I mentioned someone had asked the question, what's the difference between Spring Cloud and Kubernetes? And I mentioned that if your application is written in Java, then you would be selecting this if you want the ease of developing and deploying those stuffs. So my application has now come up. One running instance is there. It has registered as well, so others can identify it. I'll pick up this and I'll go and try and reach the application. Let's see. Application is deployed, but our code is not deployed, okay? It's not our code. It's not our code. Now, how do we go ahead and deploy our code? We had created a jar file of ours. So we can go ahead and say Azure Spring Cloud app deploy. Last time it was app create. This time it is app deploy. I'll give the name Hello Spring, and I'll give the name of the service which we have started, the app. That is also called as Hello Spring for us. So one is the name of the Spring Cloud, one is the name of the app which we have deployed. And I'll give the name of the resource group over here. This is the resource group. And I would go ahead and give the path of the artifact. So artifact hyphen path. From where will it pick up the jar? So target. Oh, I'll have to go ahead and look. Do I have that? I would need the name of the jar file. So I'll just press a Control C here. Do ls, C target, and do ls. Okay. Now let me get this and supply the name of the jar file. This is the jar file I plan to deploy. I am inside target folder, is it? No. I've given a slash. That's the reason it was not able to find. The Hello Spring has the target folder in which this jar file is present. So at present, the instance which is running, in that I'm going ahead and deploying my code. So last time when we tried browsing our application, it gave this app is up and ready, the default page of Azure Spring Cloud. Next, once our application is deployed, we should get a greetings from Azure Spring Cloud, the message which we had seen in our controller.java, which we had deployed. We had written a hello controller.java. In that, we had written a return statement like greetings from Azure Spring Cloud. That has to be shown up. So I'll just leave the screen for a while and I'll move on to my next use case. Once it is deployed, I'll show you that it is up and running. Okay, so let's see if we have any. Yeah, we have those options, roll back, roll blue, green deployment, and all those things are also there. Instead of uploading the artifact, is there any option like to upload the cloud and the code to build Spring Cloud? So here you can upload the jar file, tar file, zip, those options are there. Rahul. So you can go ahead and upload, but the build output has to be there. At present, this has gone down because application is running. Let me go ahead and refresh this and see what's the status of it. So let this finish. Let's take one more use case. Okay, this is done. So you have option of restarting and all those stuffs here. This page should be up. Yeah, so this greeting page has come up. So this is a simple application. This is a simple application. So this application is not having a backend and all that stuff. Let's complicate our application a bit more and see how we have to go ahead and handle that. So I will go ahead and show you another application. For that, I'll go ahead and create another Azure Spring Cloud. So I am giving a different resource group name, and let me give the name as Pet Clinic. This time I'm using East US2. And I am not changing anything. Last time we have seen all these. I'll just go hit on review and create, and we would go and look at the architecture of the application which we are planning to deploy. Let me create this, and meantime, we would go ahead and discuss about the architecture. So let me take you back to the slides. So we did this part. I had mentioned you need these stuffs to go ahead and deploy these applications. Now, the second application which I'm deploying is a complex application, which has multiple microservices inbuilt in it. So there would be a API gateway, which would receive all the requests. It's a pet clinic application. It's a pet clinic application. Pet clinic application here is decomposed into 4 different microservices. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. The 4 blue boxes. All of them are independently deployable application, and everyone has its own responsibility. Like the customer service, this has the input logic and validation, pet name, owner name, all those things, address, city, phone number. That is customers' data handling part it is doing. Visit service, that keeps a track of the store in which you have visited for the pets, what comments you had entered, all those things can be seen up over here. Now, in the vet service, it will store your pet's name and database, when did you visit the doctor and all that, that would be showing up over here. API gateway, single point of entry from outside to the system. And this will handle all the requests, and it would route. You can see from here, we are originating and reaching each of the services. So this is handling all the requests which comes, and then it would send that to the either of the 3 important core services, whichever is getting called from the external API by the client, it would route it over there. This is our code base. We will also create a config server. This is our service registry. Registry which we are using is Eureka. If you can see here, all the services come here and register with it. This is for logging and monitoring. This is for logging and monitoring, and they have their own databases. They have their own databases. So we plan to deploy these instances, at least one of them, and see how it works. Our intention is that. So as we created our Spring Cloud instance here, it will take a bit of time. Now let's go ahead and get our piece of code and have our code getting deployed. We need to build our application. We need to produce a jar file, and then that jar file would be picked up and it would be deployed, right? So let's do that part of it meantime when our application is coming up. So let me take you to this terminal, and I'll move out of this application folder. If you see here, I have Spring Boot Pet Clinic microservices named here. The folder is already there. And in that, you have different folders for vet, visit, discovery, customer. There are other services as well. And the pom.xml file is also present over here. So we have gone ahead and execute this Maven clean command. We will skip the test cases and we will just create a jar file for it. Multiple jar files would get generated dependent on how we have defined the things. And we can go ahead and deploy these applications into our apps which would get produced. So I'll go ahead and first, by the time this is building, let's see if our Spring Cloud is deployed. It is not yet deployed. We also will configure a configure server this time, an extra piece of it, a configure server this time. So let's see. Here the jars are getting generated. In some time, you will have the target folder created with several jar files. So we can deploy individual instances. It's like customer service. We are deploying, or we are deploying the web service. We are deploying the visit service. It's our standalone independent one. It's not necessary if the visit service is not there, you would not be able to deploy the rest of them. That decoupling is already being done. You can see here, these many stuffs are generated. These many steps are generated. If I do ls and I go to the target individual applications, you can have a target folder in all of them. And this is the thing which has got generated now. Like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all of them, most of them, leaving that Terraform and all. To automate the deployment and all, we can go ahead and use Terraform as well to create Spring Cloud in an automated fashion. So that's a reason that is there for handling those use cases as well. Otherwise, the admin server, the API gateway, the config server, the customer service, discovery server, web service, and visit service. These are the one which we are actually planning to use. So this is taking some amount of time. Our application is built already. Let's see if we have any questions in meantime. A lot of questions regarding languages. Oh my God. Okay, do we need to create a new Spring Cloud for every microservice of an application? Can't we add them? See, I am not creating, Venkat, I'm not creating a microservice for the same application stack. The first example which we took was a separate application, which was just having one microservice in it. This has several microservices. 7 of the microservices would get deployed. It's a separate application stack. So normally for one application stack, you create one Spring Cloud, and then you deploy the applications inside apps. So I would create apps inside this for the individual services. Before creating app this time, we would go ahead and configure our configuration server. So what is a configuration server? A config server is like a central location, a service which will help us in distributing the configuration to all the different services. So all configuration you keep in configuration server, it's like a plug and play type of thing. You can even keep those things in our Git, and you can say that every service will pick up the configuration from here. Every service is going to pick the configuration from here. So I have the Git URL of my config server. I'll go ahead and supply it over here. Once you have given your Git URL, click on validate. It will see whether it can connect to that Git link, Git repo link and all, and it should be able to pull those application like configurations and all, right? In case we have a private repository, then we would have to supply the token and all. These days, Git has stopped from September 13. Password-based authentication is entirely not supported. So you will have to create a PAT, a personal access token. So this has validated it. I'll go ahead and apply it. This will take some amount of time. This configuration server would get applied. The changes what we have done, that would get applied. So other services which we go ahead and deploy after this, it would be going ahead and referring this particular configuration server going ahead. So I'll do some default settings in using AZ configure. Let me go back to my terminal and let me get back to the main folder. I'll do a clear here. I want to set some default resource group and Spring Cloud name so that for every command which I do, because I have to create so many apps and so many deploy commands I'll run, it should not give me a problem. So resource group name, let me pick up. Resource group name is not this. Resource group name is Pet Clinic Archie. And the name of the Spring Cloud is Spring Pet Clinic. So that I would give. So Spring-Cloud, you can give equal to, you can give a space either or and give the name. So from now onwards, whatever I go ahead and deploy, that would be executing in this resource group for the Spring Cloud. Otherwise, everywhere I have to give -s, instance name, and all that stuff. So first app which I'm creating is for the API gateway, number of instances, how much of memory you need, and do you want to assign a public endpoint? API gateway would have external connectivity. So I would obviously go ahead and ask for a endpoint for it. So this is one of the app which would get created. Same way you can go ahead and create other apps as well, like a customer service app, a web service app, a visit service app. Like that, we would have to deploy multiple apps. Now let's go ahead and see this. Here, we should see our API gateway getting registered. Let me go ahead and use another terminal. Parallelly, I'll execute two commands. Lazy to wait for it. AZ account show. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and create another app service. They are individual, right? I can deploy them individually. I'm creating customer service. So customer service app is getting deployed, code is not getting deployed. So it's just a instance which will come up, but code will not be there. Code we have to do with app deploy command, how we did last time. So in that point, we would be putting our jar file into it. So here one app is getting created, here one app is getting created. End of the day, you should have two different apps listed over here. They should be registered. They should be in running state at present. It isn't creating. This guy has just started, so it doesn't have a state updated yet. Uh, Going back to this, sorry, I just clicked on something else. So going back to the apps, yeah. Now, there are different other apps as well in this. It's just not the two of the apps which are there. No, each of the app has their own amount of resources. You can see we are asking for different amount of resources. They are not sharing the resources here. Every app has its own dedicated resource. So you can think this is just a framework which is there inside which when you create an app here, you specify how much of resources you need. So for app one, you need, say, for example, 2 GB of RAM and 300 millicore of CPU. And then you go ahead and deploy another app too. That would have its own resources and it would have its own deployment. It would have its own deployment. So for us, this is customer service at present. And the first one is the API gateway. This is the API gateway. In this, we would use the API gateway jar file. And in this, we would use the customer service jar file. So Sanal, I think your question is answered in case. Great. So this is ended. Let's see the other one. The one running in a different tab. This has also ended. Now, application instance is there, but our code is not deployed. So it's time to pick up our code and go ahead and say that this is the jar file where you go ahead and deploy on this specific instance. So app deploy, give the name of the app where you want to deploy. You're giving the jar file path. This is the path and some JVM options you have specified over here. Same way for the other one also, I'll do it in a different terminal so that both of them gets deployed simultaneously. So same thing here, I'm deploying customer service jar. Okay, I'm not in that Spring Boot Pet Clinic Microservices folder, and that's the reason this guy was not able to find the jar file. Now it should be good. In this folder, I was already present inside this, so it could find it. It didn't give me an error. You can see no such file or directory, it said, because it was unable to locate the jar. We also have commands like Azure Spring Cloud app list. You can list all the app services which are belonging to that Spring Cloud as a table. You can look for the public URL. You can look for the deployment name, the resource group name, the location where they belong to. Everything can be viewed from there itself. So this will take a while for this deployment to finish and our application to serve our Spring Boot Pet Clinic application. Meantime, if I have to create one more session, I don't know how many of them I would be creating, but let's do that. Yeah. So I'll get on to the. So here we can go ahead and deploy various other services. Like I have other app service. I'll go ahead and deploy one by one. I'm deploying the admin server. And then I would go ahead and deploy the vet service, the visit service, those three, and then we would go ahead and deploy our application into that. So let this run. Let these also run. And let me create one more instance of it. And in this, I'll run the vet service. For few of them, I would need an external connectivity. There, I'm asking for a assign endpoint. For few of them, I don't need an external connectivity. Then I don't ask for it. Here, I think it should fail because it would not be able to find the jar file. Let me go ahead and first get into the folder and then go ahead and execute this command. So I'm creating app service for the vet. Oh, it already picked up. Okay, I was not into the deploy. So it has created it, it says, well and good. I pressed Control C, but I think the deployment is in progress. Let me go ahead and create the visit service. With this, all individual services would be done. So we have an admin service, a vet service, a visit service, API gateway, and a customer service. These many number of microservices are there. Little bit complex application, right? So let us go and check. Here the app is deployed. We will have to keep a track of what we have deployed. We have deployed the API gateway or customer service here. And here we should have deployed the API gateway. Two of our application services are deployed. Let's deploy the third one. The admin server is also up. So I'll go ahead and deploy the admin server. So in this, I will deploy the admin server. At least let me keep different instances for each one of them. For the vet service, I'm using the same terminal. App deploy, the name of the service, the jar file. So it's all same command. It's just like different microservices will come up. So last time when this was getting deployed, you remember I had pressed Control C. This guy has gone crazy. It has those things or not. Let us go ahead and check. API gateway, customer service, vet service is there, but this guy is not up. It's not completely deployed. So I'll go ahead and delete this. It was not finished. I had pressed Control C. The name was existing, but that guy is not deployed. So let me go ahead and deploy the vet service app once more. Then I'll go ahead and do the app deploy for vet service. So how many applications like this we are deploying? API gateway. This is one app. Customer service, admin, vet, visit. These are the ones. Admin server it is called as, vet service it is called as, and visit service it is called as. These are the 5 different services or apps which we are deploying. So you can see here, these are the 5 different apps: admin server, API gateway, customer service, web service, and visit. Let me go ahead and check. Admin server is deployed. Visit server is not deployed. Let me deploy the visit server application with the jar file. Okay. So your visit server is coming up. Admin server is done. Wet is pending because wet was not created at all. That's the reason I'm waiting for it to finish. Once this is done, then I can go ahead and deploy it. Meantime, let's go ahead and access our application as well. So this is my first API gateway from where I can reach my application. Let's try accessing this. Let's see what it says. Welcome to the pet clinic application. You can register yourself here, like Mamta Jha, address Sarjapura Road, Bangalore, and phone number is some junk. I can even add my pet details. You can see here, these are the previous data which is there in this I've added. I don't have a pet, so pet detail is not put in here. You can go ahead and look at the owners. You can filter the owners as well from here. So this has come up with the application. A lot of things are yet to be deployed. A wet service is yet to be deployed. It has not yet deployed the wet application. Let me go ahead and see the wet service. Yes, it has been done. So I'll go ahead and deploy my wet service app deploy command. So for each of the microservice, I'm doing first app create and then app deploy, app create and app deploy. And when we had done that Maven build, for each of them, a jar file is already produced. For each of them, the jar file is already produced. So they together are forming an application and the serving together. Okay. Now we can see a lot of stuffs here. You can go ahead and click on this. I'll go back to the pet clinic. I can config server is being deployed. You have apps being listed over here. At present, only this guy is not deployed. You can see one running instance is not there. Others have one running instance in them. You can go ahead and go to application insights and you can go ahead and start clicking on it and looking into the application map, all those things you can do. You would find the diagram of the application getting listed. I'll just maximize this. Hold on. So you can find admin server, Hello Spring, web service, app gateway. Then you have your customer visit. All those are listed over here. I'm trying to pull the details of each one of them. You can see here. HTTP requests, when they come up, all of them would come to the app gateway and from there it should get routed. So this is the application map. You want to do anything, the logging, monitoring, tracing, all those things can be looked from here. There are commands, Azure Spring Cloud app logs. You can give the name of the service, you can give the name of the resource group, and you can look for the logs as well for individual microservices. You can go into log analytics and look into their logs. You can even go ahead and write your queries and filter out the logs. You can go ahead and do that. You have options for looking into matrices over here, which app is consuming how much of resources and all that. At present, it has just started to run. So you can go ahead and find out the availability metrics or anything, whichever you want to filter out, the graphs. You can go ahead and do that. Number of connections, dependent on number of connections, the page load, network connection timeout, how many failures have happened, how many failed requests were there, available memory, all those things we can go ahead and uh, have graphs generated and look into the matrices. So this will give us a fair amount of idea. The amount of resources it is utilized. From here, if you click, you will directly go into the log analytics page. So here our application is up. It has multiple microservice, 1, 2, and these 3, 5 of them. And I have one Spring Cloud created for it and 5 different applications deployed for it. At present, the application is using an inbuilt database. If you want to integrate and have your own database uh, integrated with it, then you will have to do quite a few number of actions for it. I'll show that in a next example, integrating with MySQL and integrating with Cosmos DB. So this is our application, which we have deployed. So here you can go ahead and vets are available. So this is up and running. You should see now the vet app also to be up and running. Let me just uncheck this and have this check and click on it. Vets app should be up and running. All of them are up and running. And that's the reason this is also showing up the data. And here you have all the data of different types of users. I added myself to the database as well. And this is my home. So this is an application which is served with help of 5 different microservices. Okay, let's see if we have any questions. API gateways are used to route the API requests which are coming when I click on the vets. It should take me to the vets services, but I'll not have an external connectivity for the vet service, Shrey. That's the reason my all request will go to the API gateway, and from there it would get routed to the actual service which is there. So the responsibility of the app gateway is to route. So I had not chosen the network when I created. Otherwise, the network, if I would have created a dedicated VNet, then in that VNet subnet, these microservices would have got deployed. I had not selected that. So imagine, because we are using platform as a service, there is a network in Azure handled by Microsoft. There would be a subnet in which our applications are running. So you can go ahead and supply your VNet and subnet and all, but we had not done that. Don't we have to configure the app gateway like backend services or front-end services? So see, Eureka takes the responsibility of registering and everyone registers there. And the code is there that what type of API request is coming depending on the API call. Our application is intelligent enough to pull the data and understand which microservice it needs to connect. Yes, we have a GitHub repo for the Spring Boot Pet Clinic application. I'll surely pass on that to you people. Just give me a second. I'm putting the git clone command on the chat. Yeah. Now in this, we have not worked with a lot of stuffs like we learned how to configure a config server in this. And we need to now learn how to integrate our databases to it, how to integrate database. So I'll pick up another application in which I have two different flavors of database. One service is using MySQL, another service is using Cosmos DB. So I'll pick up that and I'll show one more scenario. So this was my second app. I'm coming out of it and I'm going to the third application. Don't get confused thinking that there are multiple of them. Then like, why are we not deploying them on a single Spring Cloud? We are not doing that because they are entirely different application stack. First stack had just one microservice. Second stack had 5 different microservices. That was a different application. Now we are planning to go ahead and deploy altogether a different application. For this application, I have created my Cosmos DB and database and kept it here. If you see, Log Analytics Workspace, Cosmos DB account, and MySQL. I have already created and kept it so that we can quickly go ahead and just, there is a template with which you can go ahead and deploy. I'm putting that template as well. You can find this template. That template would help us in deploying these resources. I will go ahead and create a Spring Cloud account. Hello Spring got created inside this. Okay. So I'm going ahead and creating a Spring Cloud account over here. I can go ahead and create from the command line as well. Let me create from the command line because I have created from the portal quite a few number of times. Let me go ahead and show you how do we create from the command line. I'm getting back to the home folder so that in case I'm cloning the code, I am not doing any mistake. Spring Cloud create. I would give the resource group. I will give the Spring Cloud name. I will say enable Java agent. This would be for the monitoring, Java in progress monitoring agent it is called as, and I am picking up the SKU. So I've not given here these variables I need to specify first. So let me go ahead and specify. I will pick up the resource group. Can I copy it from here? Will it allow? Okay, let me go ahead and copy it from here. This is my resource group, and I would have to give a Spring Cloud name. So let me define a variable for that, and I would give a name. Say Azure Spring Weather App. Let's see. And now I'm executing this command. I'm saying Spring Cloud create. This is the resource group. This is the name of the Spring Cloud. And do enable your Java agent. And I can give that US standard. So this would be going ahead and creating a new Spring Cloud instance. Yeah, it is creating. So in some time, we should see a Spring Cloud instance with name Azure Spring Weather App. Here we should find the third one. We are going to deploy our third application. So by the time this comes up, let me see if we can go ahead and do any other stuff. Okay. So who would help me defining Cosmos DB? What are the advantages of Cosmos DB? Yes, Harsh, only API gateway would be exposed to the external world. Rest of them didn't had a URL associated to it. If you see, if I go to my pet clinic application, in the apps, I only have an endpoint created for my API gateway. Others don't have this created. If I get back to my apps for visit service, I don't have a URL like that. It is empty. It is empty. But you can see a test point for helping see whether your application is really up. Test point is there, but this is the actual URL, which you don't have. So pet clinic application has only this API gateway, which is exposed. Okay. Don't be sorry for being a mechanical engineer. It's okay. So yeah, we are discussing about Java stuff. So a lot of time, a lot of things might not be known to us. So one of the applications which we deploy, we would be going ahead and integrating our Cosmos DB, Azure Cosmos DB with us. So Cosmos DB is nothing but a fully managed NoSQL database. These days for modern application, majority of the time, NoSQL databases are considered, and they have like single digit millisecond response time, automatic scalability, guaranteed speed, how much number of instances it has scaled up. You have that guaranteed response time for it. And the best part is multi-region data distribution. Anywhere in the world, if you want to keep your data and you want to access it, that would work. So administration is taken care by Azure, and that makes our life simpler. So DB, that Cosmos DB, whatever service we have, that takes the database administration of our hands with automatic management, update, patching, everything would be done by them. And we just need to keep an eye on what we are creating. The database, what we are creating, that should be our concern. That should be our concern. So here we have created a Spring Cloud account already. I'm switching from here to there when the commands are executing. So be patient with me. Hopefully people are not hating the session because of the switching context. I'll go ahead and set the default resource group in this default Spring Cloud again, so that in the command, I don't have to again and again give the details. So I'll configure defaults. Default group name I'll supply. I can use this variable which I had defined. So whatever is there in this variable, that I'm setting it as my default resource group now. And same way for the Spring Cloud. It is -cloud, and I'll go ahead and fetch the name of this variable and supply it over here. So I have just created a Spring Cloud account. I would have to go ahead and create my code and all that stuff, right? So I have gone ahead and created the code and kept it. One microservice is called as simple microservice. Sorry, I'll go with the city service and the weather service. These two I have to pick up, not the one which I'm talking about at present. So let me go ahead and so I'll go to the city service. Okay. Let me go ahead and show you. I have done some changes to the code. Okay. So I have written a city Java application code, and I have written a city controller.java code. Let me maximize this guy. So if I go ahead and look at city Java code is just containing, it's creating a city domain object. And here you are just setting up the name and all that stuff for the city. This is the class city which we are defining. There was another file which actually helps us in querying the database. So you can see here, this particular city microservice, I would be integrating with our Cosmos DB. So this class will get its DB configuration, the Cosmos DB configuration with there is something called a service binding, which we would configure right now after this, after showing you this. So you can see here, the Cosmos DB URI, the key, the database, and here you can see the query and all that stuff written. So this file we have written so that my application can integrate with the Cosmos DB. So there are two different files which needs to be present. And we would go ahead and create an app service. But before to that, our database part should be stitched up. We need to have something called a service binding, For that, first we will go to our Cosmos DB. Let me go and click on my Cosmos DB account. This guy is my Cosmos DB account. In this Cosmos DB, I have Data Explorer. I will feed in some items into it, some names of the cities. What happened, guys? I reload Hoja. Squee literally troubles many a times. Here you should get the SQL API stuff. It's not coming up. The pages are loading. This guy is not showing up the data. I don't know what to do now. Okay, let me see if someone had any question. Okay, people had answered to the database stuff. Great. So this TP I had brought up using the same template today in the morning and kept it so that things will look good and we can do it quickly. So in the Data Explorer part, I wanted to enter some items under city so that we can query them later. But that doesn't seem to work out. It took a while. Thank God it has come. Okay. I would write in few items. I would write new items like Paris belonging to France, London belonging to UK, and then we would go ahead and query them and see the weather of those cities later. So I'll go ahead and give this. I'll save this. I'll write another new item in which I'll say London, UK. Okay. So two items are created here, and later we would be querying these items. So here, if you see, we have the database already present, but we need to integrate our DB with our Spring Cloud, right? So for that, what I'll do, I'll go back here to my resource group. And you can see here, this Spring Cloud, which we have created. I'm going to that. And here, I have not deployed the apps. There is no service app, nothing is there. So I'll first go and create an app for my city service, and that I will bind with my database. So let me go ahead and do that. Let me pull this bar. Doesn't want to come up. Okay, let me use it here, or else no issues. So this is my city app. I don't have to be in this folder to create a app. When we deploy, I need to be here for sure so that we can pick up the jar file. At present, I'm deploying the service city service app. It would get deployed with a default code. Once this is deployed, we have something called a service binding. Inside that service, and I go and say that this is getting binded to with database account, which database I would be referring to, what would be the default type of data, like Cosmos DB supports Cassandra, Mongo, SQL, and all, right? You specify that and you go ahead and create a binding between your application microservice and your database. That intention is there over here. So for that, app has to be up, and I can go ahead and create a jar file of the code in meantime. So let me go ahead and keep that as well ready. I can do a Maven clean package and skip the test case execution and create a jar file and be ready so that once the application app is deployed, we can go ahead and deploy our code as well. So here the code is getting built. Here the app is getting deployed. Once the app is getting deployed, the front and back end stitching we would do, and that we would do it from here. For that, the app has to be ready. So once the app is ready, I'll do the service binding part. So let me show you the service binding part over here. You can see here service binding. I would go ahead and create a new service binding. And you can give a name over here like Cosmos DB-city. Subscription remains the same, binding type. And here the resource name. This was my Cosmos DB's name. The API type SQL. The database name. When I used a template to create this DB account, that time the database is also created and I'm selecting the primary master key. With this, the service binding will get created. Let both the things happen together. This is the binding. So app instance will come up once we deploy. At present, this app would have the default piece of code. We would go ahead and deploy our code in which it would show us that France and this Paris, France, and London, UK data as well. So that we would do once our application is deployed. Yeah, so this is created. This is created. Let's see if the build has ended. Build has also ended. Amazing. Both the things have happened together. Now I'll go ahead and deploy my jar file. So app deploy, I want to do it in my city service, and this is the path of my jar. I don't need an external URL for it. If you see, when we executed this command, you never asked for an endpoint. You never asked for an endpoint. We would deploy a gateway as well. So let's try to picturize what we are actually doing. So this is my city service, and this is my Cosmos DB. Same way, I'll have my weather service as well. And here I will have its own database, MySQL database. And then I would have a gateway. Which will help us route the traffic. And this communication would be done with service binding, which we have just now done. We mentioned which Cosmos DB account, which database, all those information. Here as well, we would go ahead and do a similar thing, the service binding. And like this, we can go ahead. So I would need a front-end app from where I can go ahead and call this. So a front-end app, Microsoft has already deployed a front-end and kept. In that, if you give your gateway's URI, you would be able to call that. And you can go ahead and actually simulate your application. So front end is separate. So this is what we are actually going ahead and deploying. So database communication was important. Hopefully everyone has understood the service binding thing. We can add environment variables as well. I'll show you the other flavor, Shrey, in the SQL one. In that we have environment variables and all. We have implemented both the things in two different ways. So if you can see here, when I showed you that file, let me go ahead and show you this file. I think we had looked into this. These values would be grabbed from that service binding. These will get populated from that service binding. Here, we have not used environment variables for it. For the MySQL one, I'll show you the environment variable way. Okay. Hope that makes sense. What is front-end gateway name? So this is just a front-end application. It's not a gateway. It's a front-end app. Sorry. It's a front-end app which is exposed to the outside world. Okay. External. And here you can supply the URL of your gateway. So whenever request comes, it will get routed over here. And from here, dependent on what you are browsing, the data would be fetched and it would be showcased. Like which city, what is the weather? That is what we are planning to do. City is saving its data in Cosmos DB, and weather is storing its data in MySQL. Yeah, it's an open source stuff. You can certainly try that. I'll give you those URLs. I have not developed this application. I'm just showing a demo, Rahul. So, okay. So I think our application deployment should have been done. Let's see what we had executed. Yeah, app deploy is also done. So if app is deployed, we should be able to access that application. Let's see, how do we access that application? I don't have an external URL to go and check for it because it's a backend type of service. But I have a test endpoint. If I just go and type this endpoint, it would not show up. It'll give me an error. It'll give me an error. I need to list the cities. So city spelling is correct. CITIES, yeah. You can see here, both the items are showing up. If I write like that 10 items, it will show me the data for the 10 items. So at present, 2 entries, both are showing up. So /cities is the endpoint on which you can curl and you can list the cities we have created. If you have created, say, Bangalore, India, that also would have listed. But at present, we have not done that. Now, this is our first application, which is integrating with Cosmos DB at the backend. Let's move on to the weather service, which would integrate with MySQL. So that also we will go ahead and create. In this, there are a lot of commands to be executed. I've made a note of it so that I don't make a mistake. So this is a piece of code which has to be there. But for that, we would create some MySQL firewall rules and all that MySQL should accept requests from our Azure service, which is nothing but Azure Spring Cloud. We don't have a database created from that template, so we would create a DB as well. So let's do that, and then we would go ahead and do the integration part of it. So there are a set of commands. I am populating these variables. Like it would just query and grab the SQL Server name, SQL username, the MySQL host name and all that, so that we can use it in the further commands going ahead. It is just populating these variables. We had created the SQL Server from the template which I have shared. So now I'll go ahead and check the IP address over here. my IP. I'm curling and getting what's the IP address. And I want to add a firewall rule that from this IP address, the query, if it has been sent, it should accept it. So I'm generating a firewall rule on my MySQL that when a request comes from this Azure Cloud Shell, it should accept that. So let this rule get created. I'll just check if people have any questions. Yes, it would be uploaded. Vivek is saying, okay, Vivek is saying that. So sorry, I was just reading. Uh, that is what I meant by service binding, injecting environment variables like DB URL. Thank you. Okay, cool. Yes. So VMware has clubbed with Azure to give this as a service. So you would find a lot of similarities as well. I am accepting any packets coming from this Cloud Shell. I want to also enable so that any request which is coming from any of the Azure resources, it should accept. So for that, I'm giving allow connection request. And once this is done, I'll go ahead and create a database in that server. And I would get the database name, and we would go ahead and do the binding part of it. So here the binding would be done a bit different. So I'm creating a database named Azure Spring Cloud Training, and I've given the SQL server, MySQL server, in which it has to create this database, the AZ MySQL DB create. So database gets created. After that, we will just dump the name of the database. Once it has a associated string after that, right? So here I'm dumping the SQL Server username, and the database name is there in like we normally need the database server name so that we anyways have in the variable. Now let's see how do we bind it. For binding, have we deployed our we have not deployed our weather service yet. So first, let's go and deploy weather service app. App has to be created, right? Then only I can bind it. I should have done it first. That would take a bit of time. So this is created. This is under construction. It is provisioning now. Once that is done, we would be able to go ahead and bind the stuff. So we will go ahead and do the binding once it is created. Let me go back and like last time, do it parallelly. So service binding, create a service binding, give a name, say weather DB. It's not the Cosmos DB, it's Azure database for MySQL. Then you have the resource name. This is my resource. The database, this is the one. And username. Username, I had dumped it over here. Where is it? Without spaces, let me pick up correctly. Yeah, this is the username. Password I had given when I had created it. Hopefully in the morning when I created it in a half sleepy state, I remember it. Hopefully that doesn't fail. Okay. Meantime, what we would go ahead and do, we have not built our code. So let's see the code part parallelly by the time this guy is coming up. So go back to the weather. Yep. So let's go to SRC, main, Java. So weather.java is created. In this, you are setting the city, you're getting the description, you're setting the description. You have some icons, raining icon, sunny icon, those things are there in it. Some default icons we have picked up. And there is a controller as well. This is the controller. And you can see here, it is trying to fetch the city by ID. Get weather for city, it will go and fetch the weather for a specific city which comes up. So these two applications have to be updated. And yeah, what else do I have? I don't think I have anything else. We have to add so I'll go back to my main folder, cd dot. Along with Java, we have resources, application properties. I have given this line, DDL auto create thing. So hibernate automatically, that it means. And I have imported this 2 lines. So Paris, France, weather very cloudy, weather fog, quite cloudy, weather pouring. 2 informations I have updated in the weather. So this would be in my SQL database. I'm using that. So we will go ahead and deploy our application once it is built. I think I had built it. No. Weather app is getting created. City app. Okay. This is the place. We have created the weather app. Now let's go ahead and build the tar. The tar, I'm saying the jar. Sorry, my bad. Sorry, I'm feeling a bit thirsty. Let me have a sip of water. Okay. So you can see the microservices are pretty small and they get created pretty quick and all that stuff. They don't need that much of time to go ahead and actually build. That's the beauty of microservices. They are smaller in size. Now we have gone ahead and deployed the app default flavor. Let's go ahead and deploy our jar file, which will have that data that city Paris is having very cloudy environment, and we would have a weather fog type of icon associated to it. So this would take a while. We will later go and test it. Meantime, let's go ahead and do the gateway deployment as well. The gateway deployment that is still pending. So I'll go to a different terminal, come out of it, and gateways here. So in this, I have SRC, I have main, I have resources, and in that I have application.yml, in which we have written few of the things like the Spring Cloud data from where we are getting the microservices, service registry stuff and all that. You can see here, gateway discovery locator is enabled so that it can go ahead and register. That is there. And yeah, that's the one. So I'll go ahead and build this first and create a gateway app. So gateway app would need an external connectivity. So you can also ask like this, is public set to true or enable endpoint type of thing. Both the things work. So if we go back to this guy, you should have 3 services now. Gateway is coming up. This guy is succeeded. Let's see if this is deployed. This is deployed. Let's try and access our application. Let's try and access our application. Go to the weather service, pick up the test. This is our city service. This is our weather service. But this, if you write, it would give you like the page would show an error. So I'll go ahead and give the city name Paris, belonging to France, and it would give this. If I write it UK London, it would show me that. So my app is up and it is serving. Both the apps are up and it is serving. So good thing is that applications have deployed and they have binded. If they don't bind to the backend, the data would not have been visible because that data is fed to the database. So both the services are able to interact with our backend. So this part is done. This part is done. This part is under creation. We are building the app. This is under creation. And once the gateway app is built up, we would go ahead and deploy our gateway application code into it. And then we would go ahead and test whether that is working fine or not. Then we will try to put all of them together. That connectivity which you were asking was missing in the last example, that I'll show it here, how that connectivity is done. So I'll just wait for this app to get created, and then we would go ahead and meantime, let me go ahead and build it as well. The jar build is not done, so I'll go ahead and build my application and wait for this guy to finish so that we can go ahead and deploy. So app is created, but it would be the default code. I've built it once yesterday, and that's the reason it is getting built pretty quick. But or else the microservices are small enough that they get built very quick as well. So this is the app deployment. Let's finish with it. Then we will try to put all of them together. So for putting all of them together, what we have to do, we will just go ahead and access this front-end application. You people can also access, but you don't have a gateway deployed. So this will not work. And here I would give my gateway's URL, the external URL which we are creating, that we would give. So I'll just wait for this to finish and go back to my gateway. Pick the URL. URL is not going to change on the redeployment with a code. Picking out this and going ahead and putting it here. So this is my Azure Spring Weather App Gateway. Let's see, this guy is still running, so I'll patiently wait for it. Meantime, we can see a few other stuffs, like we can go ahead and look into App Insights. We can look into the application. Where is it? Yeah. Application map. So city service, database, your weather service, the database. You can see over here, the services are listed. The gateway is still coming up. So recent instance is not showing. Otherwise, that would also show up. So this is the look and feel of the things. You can measure the performance, the graphs and all those stuffs here. You can see it is populating, started to populate the graphs and all that. After this, I'll show you how to scale out the individual services. For that, yeah, this has come up already. So I'll go ahead and access my page. Paris, France is very cloudy today, and London is quite cloudy. It is raining. So the city information is searched from city. The weather information is searched from the weather. Both of them combined together is populated over here. So the number of cities you have, the cloud data which gets updated into the database. According to that, a specific icon would be chosen and that would be showcased over here. So entire stack is up now. This is the URL for the Spring Cloud Gateway. Bangalore is not included. I didn't want it to do injustice with any of the cities of India because people are logging in. It's just a joke. Very bad in the jokes, but yes, I had not included Bangalore. For that, you can feed in the data to the databases and that would get queried and you would have that data also. You can take it as a task and do it. So now let's see The application deployment with the backend, we have learned two different types of backend. We have learned MySQL backend. We have learned with Cosmos DB backend as well. So it's let's see the scaling stuffs. So if I click on individual applications, the apps which I have deployed, suppose city service I want to scale out. I can scale out manually as well, and I can scale out automated as well. So there are two things, scaling up and scaling out, right? If I go ahead for the scale up, you can go ahead and increase like vertical scaling. I can go ahead and increase the amount of resources I'm actually granting to this uh, app. If I want to scale out, I would scale out the number of instances. The resources would remain the same. I just want to increase the number of instances. You can scroll like this and increase the number of instances. Dependent on how many instances you have, it would go ahead and utilize that much of resource. This is manual scaling. I can go ahead and save it. I would have 4 instances of city service. When load is increasing, a lot of people are browsing our weather service. That time we would need this. Same way you have custom scaling as well. This is the custom scaling. In custom scaling, you can define metrics-based scaling you want to do, or you want to scale to a specific instance count. That also can be done. Like instance limit, min, max, what is the default maximum? You can go up to 10, like for example, and you can specify the condition. Here you see scale based on a matrix. Let me add a rule. What would be the criteria? App, I would be selecting city service, the deployment, default deployment. Instances, I would select the instances here. And here, if you scroll down below, you have greater than 70% of the resource utilization is there, then it would go ahead and scale. Pod CPU usage. At present, it's 1.3. The CPU utilization on one single instance is 1.31. But when you want the instances to scale, what would be the percentage at which you want to scale up? 70% of the resource is utilized. CPU is running at 70% utilized. That time, go ahead and scale it. Then you can provide that. So I would just provide the instances of city. I'm not giving the weather instances. And I would say 10%, and I'll say add. So increase count by how many? Increase percentage by, increase count by, decrease. I would instance count one at a time. I would be increasing. Cooling down period would be 5 minutes. That means if traffic ramps down, in how long would you wait? It's not a spike which has come. So when the traffic is ramping down, how long would you wait for just deciding, okay, I now need to scale down. So that is the cooling down period, 5 minutes. So here you have given the minimum, the maximum, and all that stuff with which your instances counts would increase. So that would help us in scaling up automatically. So one app is selected, which is the city service. And here we have selected the default deployment. Average is taken into consideration. And here you can say when 10% greater than 10% of utilization for 10 minutes, that CPU utilization is like that, then go ahead and increase the count. So here by 5, by 1, how much you want to increase by, one at a time. So these are few of the things you can go ahead and configure, the rule and all that stuff. And you can choose this custom deployment, then your application would behave this way. If you choose the manual deployment, your application would behave the manual deployment way. So if I look at the app instances, I have 4 of them. Earlier, it was just one deployed. Now there are 4 of them deployed. Okay, so these are the 4 instances which are running. I scaled up to 4. Now there is one more thing which people would be interested to know, like how do we do a blue-green type of deployment? Correct. So if we are actually going ahead and modifying some piece of code and we want to build and then go ahead and deploy, when we are deploying at that point in time, we just need to execute app set deployment command and give a deployment name, like a green deployment. And your traffic would be going to the default one. Once you want the traffic to go to the green deployment, you can route it to the green deployment as well. So that also can be done. The next part could be the CI/CD. I'm not covering that blue, green, and all that. For that, I have to do a lot of other stuffs as well. 2 parts, should leave something for the other session as well. So 2 of the things, like I showed you how to scale and all that, we can do blue-green deployment and we can set up CI/CD. Some other day when we meet, we can certainly discuss about this as well. So that was all from my side today. If you see the application is deployed, so I'm happy today. It all went well. Hope you people are happy as well. So deployments here, default deployment is there. I would have to create one more deployment, like a green deployment over here. Here you can create one. At present, 4 of the instances are running in the default deployment. So these are a few of the things. Let me see if I have something in the slides for you. Okay, yeah. So these 2 companies have brought together and produced this. You can club that with Azure Monitor for authentication purpose. We can use Active Directory for role-based access control and all. We can integrate with Redis cache, messaging systems, databases, CI/CD. We can set up with Azure DevOps, with Jenkins. We can automate the stuffs with Terraform. We can do the config service outsourcing. Git can be the repository where the configuration is stored and you can go ahead and pick up the stuffs from there. So this is all about Azure Cloud, Spring Cloud, and benefits are being denoted here. Fully managed service for Spring Boot applications. So we can focus on just building and running our app. What we did, Max, we did app create, app deploy, app create, app deploy. When you did app create, it created an instance of the application, but with the default code. Then you produced your jar file, this jar code and all, which you created, and then you go ahead and deploy that. Done. Monitoring is simple. You have Azure Monitor, you have application inside, your log analytics, so many things are there with which you can go ahead and automate the steps. Fully managed infrastructure is there. We don't have to put our head into it. Monitoring is simple. If I want to upgrade my application deployment, create a new deployment, have it, and then route all your traffic to that. It's as simple as that. CI/CD part is also simple. Azure DevOps helps us in deploying that directly. So we have tasks with which we can go ahead and directly deploy with Spring Cloud. With Terraform and all, you can go ahead and create a Spring Cloud, like app Spring Cloud, create that app deploy, app create, and all that. Everything can be automated with Terraform as well. So maybe some other session, we would do the automated fashion of it, and we would do the DevOps pipeline with a blue-green deployment. That would be interesting piece to look. So this was all from my side today. I'll just see if some questions are there. All the codes are present. We normally pick up from the Microsoft Learn modules so that you people can go back and look into this. So there is a GitHub link called as Spring Cloud Training. I had cloned that repository in mine, so I'm giving you that link. Hope you people liked it. And if we have any questions, we can certainly discuss. There was a question, is there a way to achieve through service binding? What is that related to? Multiple data sources. Yeah, that code is there. I showed that two different services have two different databases. So they are individually linked to those DBs. So if we have any questions, do post, or else if you raise hand, we can unmute you as well. If you want to ask any question, you can raise the hand, we can unmute you, and you can go ahead and ask the question.
I have unmuted everyone.
Okay, thanks, Vivek. Yeah, Paramashivan. Editor, what is this? Which editor did you use? Azure Shell for running commands or Vim for editing the code? Yeah, I used Azure Cloud Shell and Vim editor. More from Linux background, so I'm more comfortable with it. So if anyone has a question, you people can unmute yourself and ask the question. Your mics are enabled now.
Hi, Mamta. This is Amar.
Yeah, Amar.
I understand that we deployed using the Azure Spring Cloud, but the same code could easily be portable with the AKS also, correct?
Yes. So see, for AKS, what we have to do, it's not that you can't run these things. You have created a jar, right? You have already created a jar of this code. So you have code in normally, where did this pen go? So it is writing here. So code is there. You are producing a jar. I can write a Docker file, create an image for weather service, one image, say image one. For city service, image two. Create your kind deployment for this. Create your kind deployment for this. Run this MySQL and Cosmos DB. Integrate it with your application. So this would have, like where we say instances, now my city is having 4 instances. That means it is having 4 replica pods. And my weather is just having 1 pod at the back end. So same thing. It's just, this is also a pod, which would have external connectivity. So if you say me that, Mamta, you just need to translate this to Kubernetes, I would go ahead and
It's more of a configuration change that will
yes.
be required.
So I will say I will create a gateway service, which would be of load balancer type. I will have a gateway deployment with a pod. So here I'll write pod because service will not be connected to deployment. I will have a gateway pod. And this gateway pod interacts with city service, which is of cluster IP type. And it interacts with weather service, which is also a cluster IP type. They don't have external connectivity, right? They are just having a private IP address. And then you have the backend databases. This is having the pod as well, service and pod both. And you can integrate easily AKS with Cosmos, AKS with SQL. Everything can be done.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Spring Framework just supports Spring-based application. That's a reason this would be helpful. In case you just want to do it in Kubernetes, you can certainly do that. You just need to have to containerize your application. But remember, in this worker nodes are there, you would be charged for 2 worker nodes. The cost would be 2 nodes cost minimum, because obviously high availability we will look at. Here, dependent on number of instances, you saw 1 CPU, 1 GB RAM we were asking. Then 4 CPU, 4 GB RAM is the total utilization. So resource utilization here is less. For the service, whatever they are charging, that is there.
Okay, maybe I think you have explained this back also, but maybe I've missed it. In terms of resources, we are provisioning the resources at application level, correct?
Correct. So I
So
had 3 apps. At this level, I specified how much of resources. At this level, I specified how much of resources. At this level, I specified how much of resources. Understand that every microservice has its own requirement. It would have its own scaling requirement as well. I can't say how the gateway is scaling, these two services will scale the same way. So Spring Cloud, which we are creating, that is like a placeholder for the apps. In that, you can create several apps. These apps will have deployment, and deployment has instances. This is the hierarchy.
okay,
App 2 would have its own app deployed. This is my deployment, like default deployment when we did, and it will have its own instances. So there are 2 microservices in one app stack. This is the stack in which there are 2 microservices. At present, we have 3 microservices: the gateway microservice, the weather microservice, and the city microservice. So our hierarchy actually looks like this. This is gateway, this is weather, this is city.
and this Spring Cloud service cannot be compared with ASP, correct? Though the I mean, like for ASP, under that we can create a one web app or multiple web apps, but those will all have the same compute power, which is defined under that ASP.
Correct.
But it's
Here the
not
compute power is on the app level.
happening. Okay,
So you
thank you.
can't compare. Here is the compute power defined. Scalability is defined here. So
Okay,
those
yeah,
features come in here. And
okay.
at this level, you can also create config server. And in case my applications are binding with the databases, then you have the service binding at individual app level.
Okay, thank you.
This is the hierarchy. Yeah. So it depends how you want to create your front end. You can create it any way and then connect it. It can run anywhere. It can run on my laptop as well, and I can connect it. It can run in Azure. It can run as a another app inside this Spring Cloud itself. It's just that that front end code was pre-cooked and kept, and that's the reason I picked it up the same. Otherwise, we would have deployed the front end application as well. And it depends on, like, for iOS, for Android and all, the interface would be different, right? So accordingly, you will have to make the changes. Yes, otherwise, if we don't have the code, how will things run? Code has to be there, right? If you don't have the code inside your pod, we don't insert the code. I mean, for application insights. Application inside, how we just enabled it here, you can enable it that way. You don't have to do anything extra. AKS also integrates with Azure Monitor, Log, Analytics, Application Insight, all the things. You would just need to enable it on the cluster level. It would monitor all the stuffs. It's on the cluster level monitoring, resource monitoring on the node, resource of the app, everything it can monitor, metrics, performance, all those things can be done. Very similar to what we saw.
Mamta, I have a question, Mukesh here.
Yeah, Mukesh, tell me.
Yeah, so let's say you have deployed the application and you have just deployed the gateway application, and there's only YML file where you showed the gateways enabled, right? Disco locator enabled.
Uh-huh,
So
uh-huh.
how both these services are connected to each other means to gateway, where that configuration we did.
So whenever we are creating this gateway application, the gateway has a rule book type of thing where the rules are written that if someone is trying to, when you clicked on the API, whether it is a city-based API or whether you're clicking on weather information, in our case, both are together. Clubbed information is shown on the screen, right? So whenever you are clicking on that, okay, the request goes and there is a rule book seen. That request will go to both the applications, data would be grabbed, and then the output would be showcased. In case, imagine, let's take the pet clinic application in which I had different view. If I click on vets, I saw uh, the doctor's details. If I clicked on the owner, I saw the owner and the pet's detail. So here there are two different APIs which will get called from the gateway. If we are clicking on owner, owner API gets called and gateway will see that. It will go and see. It is a layer 7 type of load balancer. It has an ability to open the packet and see what exactly you have written, the API which is called. And according to the rule book, it comes and sees, okay, which API? API is for the owner. Then send it to owner service. So it routes the packet to owner service. If it is wet API, then it goes to wet service and it routes it over there.
Can you show
So
me
we
that
had used Eureka.
Eureka display?
Eureka is the service registry
Mhm.
with which all the instances would register. Like if we go back here, registration status, you can see these are registered. These are registered.
Right.
So as and when an instance comes up, it makes an entry in Eureka with the help of which the discovery of the service happens. It is used for inter-service communication. Gateway is also a service here, right, Bhaskar? So including Bhaskar's question as well. Gateway is also a service.
Can you show me the Mamta? Can you show me the rule book which you are talking about, where we need to configure the this route
It
path?
would be there in the gateway code. I have also not looked into it, so I don't know whether I'll be able to check
Okay.
that and show you right here. But for the one, the
Okay.
Eureka thing, Eureka
Yeah.
thing and
So
all we define in the POM file, that I can show up where we are defining that stuff. Just give me a second.
okay. So you want to say all this already pre-configured, you just deployed the application. Okay.
Ah, so you see this? Like this we define. So we are saying that we are using the Eureka client. So in the dependency section, you are specifying that. The rule book thing for the API. Don't curse me in case I'm not able to find it because
No,
every
no,
has
no,
that.
no, no, no. I'm nice. If you are, I will no problem. Other, I will take a look. No problem.
Yes, let's see. No, this is demo. Demo will not have anything. This is the default one. So I feel because we are using Eureka, we don't have that rules like how we have in Kubernetes in ingress controller and all kind ingress created. It's not pretty evident here. Wherever we are saying that we are attaching with Eureka, from there itself, it should be able to figure out. But API somewhere we have to mention. I'll check on that in case I get an answer. I'll try and see how I can convey. I'm not sure. I think on the meetup page, I should be able to do that.
In .NET, there is a open gateway where we can use that things configurable. So yeah, I think. Right.
So here, the gateway code, which has been used, that is different a bit. The Java gateway code is used. There is another question. Both Linux and Azure and Windows Azure will have the same command. Which command you're talking about? The Cloud Shell command which I entered, or application properties? I didn't had any. Here it was. Why didn't it open? It had just one line. It's empty. Okay. So the commands for Windows would be PowerShell, and for Linux, we are using Bash. So whatever commands I executed, because I work more on Linux, I prefer using Bash. The commands are a little bit different. They are not same. So PowerShell commands, you have to look for a corresponding PowerShell command for app deploy, app create, Spring Cloud create, and all. They would not be same. Where it is, this routes, where is that?
I saw that in the GitHub repo, in the application YAML, in the Pet Clinic API gateway.
Okay, pet clinic one. Okay, here we have not seen. Let me see in the pet clinic. Pet clinic API gateway was a little bit different implementation. CDSRC here. This is one of the ways of routing. Like this, we write in Kubernetes as well, right? But the similar functionality, I think in that we don't have for a reason. That's the reason I also went into the application.yaml, because in this application, right, it's combined. It's not that it is going one time for a city service or weather service. Both the data is clubbed together and seen, and that's the reason the route are not defined. So here it is, the routes.
Yeah, good.
Web service, the URI for the web service, and how do you expect the API when it comes with /web, /visit, /customer, according to that it routes. In the other application, because we don't have individual services reachability from the API gateway, it's a small app which just has one functionality. It shows both the things. So that's the reason route was not there. Otherwise, it should have been in that application.yaml itself. And any other settings when you do, you write it in the app.property. Yeah, that didn't strike me that time, sorry. So I went to the file, but it didn't add the data. Cool, thanks, Ray. Thank you so much.
Yep, no
What
problem.
else?
Also, Mamta, one question. So regarding it's not related this one. So related with, let's say we have deployed the application in Docker, and so one of the services are deployed, and so how actually because when we deployed application containerization, so we don't know the IP address, because IP address of that container is generated dynamically, right? It's not fixed. So let's say I want to give the URL of that containerization. where I hosted the service in my front-end application to access the
Container,
data.
we never send a packet with the IP. You always define the name of the container. So there is in Docker also, in plain Docker, there is a Docker DNS already running inbuilt with a within the Docker host machine. And whenever you think you are sending a packet to your application on a specific IP address, but the DNS translates the container name to the IP address and gives you. So whatever is your present container IP, that would be there with the DNS server. So here you can think like the DNS work is done by Eureka. In case of Kubernetes, we have a registry called as etcd. So all are playing the similar roles. Where the pod is running, what is the present IP address that would be there. Here, where is the instance running, what is the present IP is there. Behind this URI, there would be multiple instances, right? Then the load balancing also comes into picture. 4 wet instances are there. So we are transmitting the packet to the wet service. From there, it will load balance across 4 different instances of wet application. So it's always name. You give the name, it translates. Like here, this is the name of the instance. Like that, you will give the name of the container. You will never specify an IP because IP is not static. That's one of the biggest drawbacks with containers, right? They are not stable.
Thanks.
Yeah, there are migration steps, Thaninga. We can migrate the Spring Cloud applications from on-prem to Azure Spring Cloud. Rahul, you're asking or stating whatever you have stated. Yeah, in case of Kubernetes, we always give the service name. We never give the pod name. It's always service name.
In case of migrating the existing on-prem application, suppose we are not using the inbuilt Tomcat server and we're using the external server. Is within that case, it will be possible or to migrate to Azure Spring Cloud?
To be very frank, I've not done that. I can check on it. We should be able to do it. I don't think it would be a challenge. But where do you want to run that Tomcat server? External means where? And why not within this app as an app?
I mean, yes, I mean, there could be some other use cases which I cannot think of now, but I've seen applications where they're not using the inbuilt server and they're going with the externalized version. So because when we created the Spring Cloud services, at that time it didn't show us to pull any runtime. Like when you create a web app, at that time it asks us to pick up a runtime environment. At that time, we can explicitly give me, okay, I need a Tomcat, and at that time I can deploy a Spring Boot application using an external.
Here, I have not seen any runtime stuff. Dependencies, whatever you specify, those can be specified during the creation itself. Then those things gets incorporated. Otherwise, finding out, running an external Tomcat, I'll have to check. I've also not done, so I'm not sure of it. I've deployed simple applications, not external Tomcat type of thing.
No problem. Yep.
Yeah, it should be there, but he doesn't want to run that within that stuff, right? So he wants to run it somewhere else. So we need to set up a connectivity, na, Shri, for that Tomcat.
Yeah, I guess if we run it locally, it runs on Tomcat because of Spring Auto configuration. But if it runs on a container or some pod, then it might be not running on Tomcat. It might be running on the provided server, depending on the properties that are set.
Correct. I don't see any new questions coming in. So if we are good, shall we end the session? What's the time? 12:50. Okay. Hope you people liked it and it's useful. Not sure how many people really felt that as useful.
Yeah, Mamta, that session is really helpful. And thanks for your knowledge sharing. It's
Thank
really
you.
Yep, same here, Mamta. I was used. I heard the term Azure Spring Cloud, but never used it. But this session will definitely give me a boost to go and now use this service in my projects.
Thank you. Nice to know that. In any case, we are helpful. We would be happy. So I think Rashmita, you would take over now, or
Sure, Mamta. Thank you so much, Mamta, for today's session, and thank you all for joining us today. Please feel free to do event check-in and do share your feedback about today's session. It will help us to choose our topics better. Also, please visit our Microsoft Reactor Bengaluru meetup page for more upcoming sessions. Thank you all once again and enjoy the rest of your day.
thank you so much. Thanks, Rashmita. Thanks, Vivek, for arranging this.